Hi, everybody. My name is Amy Hammis, as they just mentioned. I do work for, not through LA, right? I work at the city of Burbank, but I have been partnering with the city of LA and LA County on some collaborative type of programs. And so that's what we're going to talk about today in our government readiness portion. And that's the cool thing is you've been hearing throughout this morning so far, you've been hearing from the different stakeholders. You've heard from the nonprofits and what they need. And you've just heard from a food donation participant and what they need and what their roles are about. Now we're talking about what is required here from the jurisdictions under SB 1383. And so many of you that are listening probably already know some of this, but it's a good thing for everybody to kind of understand what we need. And so through SB 1383, cities, jurisdictions are now accountable. So there's a lot of mechanisms that were put into place. And so there's a comprehensive support that we have to work towards to enforce this. And so it also ties into other things like Cal Green, which is a construction and demolition as part of our ordinance, and model water efficient landscape. So these are things that people don't always associate. So anybody government out there, those are things that you probably already know about, but if you didn't, it's something you're gonna have to include in your ordinance and your plan building. But the big thing we want to talk about is the food donation portion of this. And so we're really looking to connect all of the dots here with that food recovery portion. Now, you see there that I have most of these things were by CalRecycle are supposed to be adopted, or at least get your plans together by January 1st of this coming year. However, there is an asterisk there. Governor Newsom was about a week or so ago signed into law SB 619, and so that is the big thing that a lot of municipalities were breathing a sigh of relief, because it doesn't mean we're delaying on anything. It just means the enforcement, where penalties and things on the cities are delayed. So we are still in the city of Burbank, and I encourage all of you still move ahead, full speed ahead, as if that didn't happen. But at least we have the pressure of knowing that we have this heavy lift, but we have a little more time before the clock really starts ticking on the enforcement. So we really need to be looking into, you see the kind of midway through here, provide to the organic waste generators the organic collection service. We have to put our whole plan together, how we're going to communicate that out to the public and to the generators. And then inspection and enforcement is also a big part of this. And then the edible food recovery, which is what you've all come here to listen to. So let's just go to the next one, edible food recovery capacity. Now, this is the big thing that right now many of us are in the throes of, as we're trying to identify the existing nonprofits that are already receiving food and have a redistribution program, but we're also having to look under other rocks too to find other partners in this. So we're out there right now asking for surveys, things like this you might have seen in your inbox that might have come from that county or city of LA. These are really important for us to be able to predict our capacity and how much we're going to be able to assess whether the generators and the nonprofit infrastructure are going to meet to be able to satisfy the demand and the need. So through that, we're also going to be posting online a map. LA County has already started working on their food drop program, and a lot of us are going to be contributing our jurisdictional list, if you will, into that food map. So it's going to be readily available for all, which is going to be a really great tool that we've never really had anything that comprehensive before. So that's really exciting. And then estimate the capacity, which would be identifying the tier 1 and tier 2. And then the capacity of all of both the generators and the receivers. And then, most importantly, building the infrastructure, identifying the gaps, like what have been the barriers of why hasn't this happened before, right? There's obviously a lot of more goes into it than just donating food, which is the happy clappy part of it. There's a lot more from the logistics and understanding the stakeholders' needs and things like that goes into it. And then finally, and this is something I didn't even know, and until recently, that we have to review the business agreements. So the nonprofits will be working with these businesses to come to some type of agreement on they're going to be partnering. So that's our enforcement part, to make sure that the tier 1 and tier 2 generators are complying and donating the food. an example of working together, which I think has been a really amazing thing, and they got ahead of this early, which was great, was LA City and LA County have a partnership. I don't know if Michelle, if you're out there, if you are, you can come in and explain a little bit about this program. If not, I can handle it too.
No, I'm here.
Hi, Michelle. Why don't you explain how this came about?
Well, as I said in the opening this morning, LA City reached out to Jennifer King at LA County, and we started talking about one, we were both going to have fellows starting with us from the California Action or Climate Action Corps. And I found out that we were pretty much going to be working on the same programs. So we decided that we would combine our efforts, and we started working first on finding the food rescue organizations. And I already had been discussing with Nancy Beta from Food Cycle LA, who also coincidentally had 2 fellows coming in from the Climate Action Corps. So we learned from Nancy that she was using this amazing, she had been part of a hackathon, an LA hackathon, and one of them was this food oasis, and she had partnered with them for a little over a year and had some really great experience. What they were doing was mapping all the food rescue organizations within the county of LA. And she was having great success in finding if she had food, a surplus of food that she needed to find a home for, through using this app, she was being very successful. So we, the county and I, actually were able to learn from this map that I have about 550 food rescue organizations within the city of LA. And Jennifer has roughly the same amount in the county of LA. So is that what you were looking for?
Yeah, no, so that provides a really good baseline. Obviously, that's going to grow, right? And especially as other jurisdictions like Burbank add to that map, that's just going to make this a really robust site, incredibly useful. But the point I think that's really cool about this is that you didn't just go it alone, right? You had a partner in with Nancy, and then Nancy already had reached out through Hack LA, something I didn't know that was even a resource out there that you could even use. You had the fellows. So part of what we're also going to be talking about is looking under many rocks to find stakeholders and partners to help, because we can't do this by ourselves. So I think it's great that you and the county partnered together early on this, and that's going to provide a great baseline for cities like mine to join the fray. So anyway, thank you so much for offering that insight on that project. So I wanted to mention that, and this is something that a lot of the nonprofits, you already know this, that you're doing this work. We have a lot of food in LA, and it, as I mentioned earlier, it's like for some reason we haven't been able to move the needle to the full potential that of all the food that's out there to connect that. And as Lewis mentioned from Food Forward has mentioned, it's like we don't have the bridges. And it's really been kind of a whack-a-mole in many cases I know I've talked to food generators, like local markets and stuff like that here in Burbank, when I mentioned the option of food donation, and they go, I can't find anybody to take it because it's not fitting for whatever reason. Maybe he's got perishable stuff that then the existing nonprofits here won't take, or there's just not that bridge to connect the two. They don't know each other. So this is where government comes in and does the work, mainly like building what we call infrastructure, right? We've been hearing about infrastructure a lot, and this is where what we do best. You think about the interstate freeway, right, system that was created, and then private commerce is able to use that to their advantage. The World Wide Web, also invented by government, right? And then the private sector was able to take it and run with it. So this is where if it could have been done, it would have been done. So this is where government's real role is providing that framework, that base, if you will, to help all of these existing nonprofits that are doing such great work, and the generators that have thought about it, for whatever reason, haven't been able to fulfill that as an option for their disposal. So we need to connect that bridge with the supply and demand. And the thing is, again, like we just used with the example with Michelle with LA County, is you can't do this alone. And I don't know if you guys have ever heard of this story. It's an old tale for stone soup. It's had many iterations over the years. But for those who don't know, the real quick synopsis of it is that there were some strangers that came into a village, and they were hungry. They didn't have any money. They didn't have any food. And they were asking the villagers, and no one would give them food, maybe from a trust issue, or they all had scarcity themselves. So the one thing they did have was a kettle. And so they decided to go down to the river, they filled it up, and they put a large stone in it, and then came back to the village and were cooking it. And so they were hovering over the kettle and getting excited. And so that caused other villagers to go by and go, hey, what's going on here? What are you doing? And they mentioned they've got this stone soup recipe that they're working on. Well, the villagers were curious, and so they wanted some of it. But the visitors, the strangers, said, we don't have enough. It's not quite ready yet. We still need a few things. So then the villagers all started volunteering. Well, I've got carrots, I've got celery, I've got spices. And so they all ran and contributed to this soup, and then everyone benefited. So they removed the stone, since it really wasn't stone soup. Everybody collaborated together, and then they all were able to get something out of it. So that's where sharing will benefit everyone who contributes. And so we really want you guys to look at how can we find those partnerships, that ability to not go this alone, because it seems daunting, especially from government. This isn't what we're in the business of doing. I mean, this is new to many of us. And so we really want to be able to figure out what kind of rocks can we look under to bring more groups together to make a really robust and comprehensive program. So we want to leave no stone unturned. Here's some of the things I've been working on in the city of Burbank as I'm trying to build this network. And that's looking through local government. Within our own city, there's many different departments. We've got the Parks Department. We've got people who are working on the homeless issue. Community development is concerned about greenhouse gas emissions. So whatever their concerns, what's in it for them, there's a way that our Venn diagrams are going to connect and find out where those partnerships in. For instance, the parks, they do a senior feeding program. At one of their rec centers, they have a full commercial kitchen with storage capacity with a cooler. But after 2 o'clock, the kitchen is fallow. Well, could that be a possibility to become a food donation hub, as they were mentioning in the panel earlier today? So look for where your existing infrastructure already could be, or the possible partnerships. The housing, if we work with the homeless groups, that's dealing with food insecurity, right? So that's feeding programs. So there's shared interest there, even though it may not be apparent to them, because we kind of work in silos in government. The other thing is neighboring cities working group, like what Michelle and LA County did. I've also joined them on a stakeholder engagement group that we've been working with some of the key primary food donation rescue organizations to get better insight and work together to create this great plan. In fact, at 1 o'clock today, I'm going to be meeting, Michelle and I are going to be meeting with Palmdale and Santa Clarita to figure out how can we connect, because food donation knows no boundaries, no geographic boundaries, right? So there's also ways that we're starting to build attention. And so we encourage you at the city level also to find those partnerships with nearby cities. I won't get into every single one of these, but the benevolent, I always pronounce that wrong, but the community out there, obviously there's food donation groups that you already know of, right? The ones that you think of. But there's also ones that are non-traditional that you wouldn't think of, like Boys and Girls Club here is actually receiving food. Not only can they distribute that to the children at their centers, but also the parents. So there's broaden your definition of what a food donation rescue organization can be. And sometimes they need convincing too. Faith-based, I mentioned here, many faith-based are already doing it, but there's a lot of churches that aren't, and some of them have kitchens, so that also could be part of our capacity hub that we're building. Group housing, they would eat perishable food, like food that comes from restaurants that's prepared, or grab and go stuff from the grocery stores. I mean, they can eat that stuff that day. And so be looking for those kinds of nonprofits that, again, haven't been traditionally getting food, but could, and really use that. And then branch out, like Michelle used with the fellows. There's also types of grad school programs as well. They may need projects, corporate partnerships. And one I really wanted to mention, federal agencies. I recently, through a faith-based connection, was talking to someone who actually used to work for FEMA, and he mentioned that FEMA considers homelessness and food insecurity as crisis, as national emergencies. So there actually could be potential for us to bring FEMA programs in to building, say, our hub system. So again, we don't know, just kind of shooting here at the dark, but everything's a possibility at this point. And here's one of my favorite. I used to be in sales before I joined the public sector. I was in sales for 2 decades. And one of the things I told my salespeople all the time is prescription without diagnosis is malpractice. And that really means understand the nuances of how the food donation and what really lurks beneath the surface from what we see as government entities. There's a lot more to this food donation process, as you've heard today, than you see above the surface. So a lot of the things that came up today were things about, what do the end users want? I thought that was a really good takeaway for me, is because it's great to get the food, but that's an in-kind donation, and there's a lot of costs and staff resources and all kinds of things that go into it. So when we're asking the nonprofits to increase capacity or join and become a food donation recipient, there's a lot more into it. So we need to be sensitive to that and what those needs are and where the gaps are, the barriers. And then the generator, as Sprout, the conversation with Sprouts was, they want to sell this stuff. So, but that also leads to other challenges. So both stakeholders need to really understand what the other's needs are, and to be able to create something really good instead of problems. But here's where our iceberg lies. What jurisdictions need? We need the capacity survey filled out. I know sometimes people see something as a survey and they go, that's crazy, or why are we doing this? I'll tell you here, we have to build this network no matter what. And so if you don't fill it out, we're going to prescribe without the proper diagnosis. So it's really, as a stakeholder, you all really do need to have your voice involved in this. And really, if you're running a nonprofit, you already know a lot of this. This stuff is really basic information that you could do a lot of it off the top of your head. So it shouldn't take that long, and it really is really going to be important for us to be able to fully understand what is out there and what we need to do and where those gaps in the system are. We need the infrastructure set and the business compliance, right? With the tier 1 and tier 2 generators need to be donating their food, and then the tracking and reporting. And that really is where the rubber meets the road for us. We are accountable to Cal Recycle and to the county who's going to compile this stuff. So we have got to be able to report this information and get that tracking. And I know that's been discussed as well as to whose role that is. And those are things that we're just to be working out. Just know that's ultimately what our skin in the game is. And to consult with the experts. Sherry was on the panel earlier, and actually Michelle and Jennifer King from county and I were out, I think a week or 2 ago, out there. We did a site visit, and it was very enlightening for us to be able to see how this actually works in reality. And we learned a lot and saw some really good examples too. Like, for instance, they had a logistics company come out and analyze their operations. I mean, that's amazing. And every nonprofit should have that, because that's going to give you proper framework and a baseline to go forward. The network, the bridge, it's, again, we need to build a deep bench. There's a lot of different varieties. We need to find easier ways to connect oversupply. As I said before, it doesn't know boundaries. So, in Burbank, I want to work with Glendale. I want to work with LA for North Hollywood and Sun Valley and those surrounding areas. I want to work with the county. So those are really important things that we need to be getting out of our silos. And then also the shared resources I mentioned before, possibly tapping into federal money, but not for just Burbank, for the whole system, because the resources are going to be very scarce, and there's going to be a lot of competition. So let's all work collaboratively to build these infrastructure systems that everybody then can benefit from on the long term. So some of the opportunities are out there. There's some great models. Oceanside has a food facility that they've created. So possibly that could be a model as well. The donation roadmap is, you have your design phase, You really got to check out your internal processes. Again, where are the opportunities within your own city, outside your silos and your departments? Look for where those partnerships can go. Identify existing programs, like I mentioned with the rec center kitchen. There is something there with the senior feeding program. How could that benefit a broader program that I'm trying to work on? Common infrastructure, if we build the bridge, they will come, right? Funding collaborations, like I said, it's competitive, so let's work together because we're all going to be using these systems one way or the other. And then we need to make sure, even when we launch a program, there's going to be problems, we're going to need to tweak. So we need to be recognizing that and constantly having engagement with those that are out in the field to make sure that we're on the right track. Work together, don't reinvent the wheel. I don't need to go into everything, but why are everyone doing their own program? Their own marketing campaign, their own tracking? We really need to be looking at how can we do a more comprehensive system, and even if we have our own different kind of tracking, how can it still communicate with the broader coalition to make sure that this data is not super redundant and super cumbersome, that it's really easy and the county gets what they need. Final thoughts. Make funding count. There's not going to be that much money, and it's not going to go forever, right? So we don't want to be trapping ourselves as governments into writing checks all the time in perpetuity. That's not going to happen. It can't. And so we need to look at where can funding, be most well spent, especially initially as we're building these infrastructure models. The ready to eat model, we look so much to the pantry system, which has already been built, right, for the most part. But where are we really focusing on the stuff from prepared food, catering, hotels? There's a lot of volume there. And again, that can immediately address with nonprofits food insecurity issues. So let's figure out ways to focus on that as well. Reusable ware, I know that's a heavy lift in time of COVID, but when you've got a nonprofit and a business working together and they've got their groove, could there be some opportunities to develop some reusable programs? Logistics, like the Greater Hollywood Food Coalition, bringing that in, I think that is such a great, smart use of money, and maybe that's something that we could look to funding. And understanding, what do the end users want? I really thought that was the biggest takeaway for me. You really have to get into their shoes and understand rather than us diagnosing this, right? And then toot the horn. If we're all talking about this, if we're all promoting it, we're all working under one umbrella of this, we're going to be able to get a lot more attention. We're going to get good PR, and we're probably going to get more leads for more parties to join the capacity. So there you go. I hope I know I probably went a little long here, as I want to do, but hopefully there's some questions. I'm going to get out of the sharing part.
Thank you so much, Amy. And I really appreciate your incredible thoughts and just leading the way. For those of you who don't know, Amy and I used to head up the LA Food Policy Council Food Waste Working Group together.
She was great.
You were great too. For some reason, my computer is not letting me turn my camera back on, but hopefully it'll
and it's so funny because, like I said, I'm back here now. I see chat and all that, but I was blind, so it's a very weird situation. So I hope I did okay. But anyway, I hope if there's questions, if we have time, great. If not,
so in the Q&A, there looks like a question popped up. As food distributor volunteers, how can we get access to the capacity surveys, or is it only the food banks that complete the surveys?
Actually, we have to do it for businesses as well, tier 1 and tier 2. They are also, that's something we're going to be out there. I know Jennifer King at the county and Michelle have already started asking businesses as well. I think it's going to be a challenging lift. Businesses have businesses to run, right? And they don't really like government kind of like, going in and poking around. So, but hopefully there's definitely at least some will get enough of a good set here, a database set. I don't know, to be honest with you, about sharing that. I don't think it's proprietary, but there might be with the businesses. So I think that might be something for Jennifer, or we can get back to the group on. But I don't want to say false information. So I'd rather just admit I don't 100% know. But I know that map is going to tell the tale, right? Because when you click on a map, you're going to see, when you click on each individual entity, you'll see the hours, what the kind of food they take and things like that. they may not have volume numbers, but at least you'll be able to compile that. So I hope that answered some of the questions.
Great. I also just wanted to make a plug for, you mentioned reusables, and I found this really great organization, Disposable, that actually has grants for restaurants to be able to switch over. And so for those of you who are in the government sector or even the nonprofit organizations that have kitchens where you're using disposables and you'd like to switch to reusables, please contact Rethink Disposable.
That's a really good point, because we think about this like, yeah, we're checking off the box. Government, aren't we great? We're reducing all this food and all this waste, but then our takeout containers are going up. Now, granted, COVID has kind of blown that out for a bit. So pre-COVID, the mindset was a little bit more towards that, but I think it's a goal, though, to be thinking about it, right? To at least eventually work it out where it works.
Well, for those of you who have any more questions for Amy, she will have her own table. It's called Food Hubs. And I think everybody should definitely chat with her at some point because she's just a wealth of knowledge. And yeah, so thank you, Amy.
Outside the box, there is no wrong answers right now. That's the beautiful thing. Throw those noodles at the wall. Let's make some stone soup.
Yeah, love that story. That's great. Okay, well, thank you, Amy.